Okay, cool. All right, well, yeah, we'll hop in. I'm coming from Kansas City, so just for
Oh,
context.
nice.
Yeah. So it's one of the cradles, and today's weird because it's like the 5 year anniversary of the pandemic, March 13th, like the beginning. Isn't that weird?
Man, I know, and I have a uh, look. I, it still feels very fresh because in early 2020, I was in Wuhan. I was playing a couple of kind of jazz meets Chinese folk music concerts with Chinese folk musicians. It was part of a unofficial sort of diplomatic goodwill tour, and yeah, like uh, the the pianist Jason Yeager and vocalist Aubrey Johnson. We were kind of put a little group together and went on this concert tour, and we still talk about it. Like, I can't believe 5 years ago, like we were we were in Wuhan. It's like, well, feels
It's
like something like the Twilight Zone.
totally, yeah. I kept thinking when it was raging that either David Lynch or the dude from the Twilight Zone was going to kind of like meet in the middle of empty Times Square and share a cigarette.
Man, that's a good visual, like for cover art.
Oh my God. I kept thinking that the whole time. Like, because Lynch always loved the real long cigarettes and just like just the whole thing. It just would make total sense to have that, especially now with Lynch being gone.
Rest in peace.
Yeah. What a genius, man. We were so fortunate to be able to dive into that creative world. What a magical human being he was. I mean, just everything he did was awesome.
I had trouble, sometimes I had trouble following his like the trajectory
Yeah.
uh, of his films, but what always uh, jumped out at me, what always struck a chord with me were the cinematography, like
Oh
the
yeah.
colors, like that was it was so, like almost like he thought like a painter,
Yeah.
you
And
know?
and he was, and I listened to a after he passed, Moby, the musician, was a big fan and a huge friend of his. And during their memorial podcast, Moby mentioned that he only painted in black and white. He was a prolific painter. Isn't that mind blowing? And sometimes he said he would use red, but usually it was black and white. I'm thinking the vivid nature, the cerebral nature of everything he presented was visually stunning. Like I remember the drive, Mulholland Drive, as they went up and the lights shone into the kind of the misty fog on the mountain, like things like that. And even Twin Peaks was replete with it. But the fact that he only painted in black and white just adds to the allure and mystery of him.
I didn't I didn't know that
That's
he
weird, isn't it?
yeah.
Like when he said that, I was like, Moby's the only one that would know because they really were tight. They were very close. And yeah, so it's weird what our heroes actually did behind the scenes and how they became who they were.
Yes, sometimes it's these kind of detours that like I mean Schoenberg took time off to paint.
Yeah.
Uh, what the Red Stare die Rote Blicke. If anyone's have native German speakers listening, forgive my pronunciation. And uh, sometimes it's uh, these other related disciplines that give the art this element of kind of mystery and
Yeah.
mystique, you know.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of like with Miles. He transitioned. I got a book for Father's Day one year. My son's name is Miles,
Okay.
so I'm clearly a Miles fan. And I got a book of all of his paintings, and it was fascinating because that became a priority for him. And I think they touched on it in the film that Don Cheadle did, but that was a part of the fabric of him. That was why I think he couldn't go back to kind of blue. He had to continue evolving because he was such an artistic force that had to continue going in an existential way forward.
Man, I was listening to God, I forget the who did the interview, but he while he was listening to the interviewer's questions he was kind of drawing, like almost seemed like he was distracted, but he wasn't. He was actually he was really paying attention, and he was
Uh-huh.
like answering all the questions. But he was just immersed in his artistic creation.
Yeah. People have told me of all the people that I've ever talked to that have ever been in the orbit of Miles, they say that he was an impeccable listener. So it lends to what you're saying. The level of like Leonardo da Vinci could write both hands and do all these multitasks. It's like I think you have that genius Einstein brain where the hemispheres are fused and they can literally do multiple things well at once.
Yeah, the kind of the the Isaac Newtons and Leibniz's of the world, and Hildegards.
Yeah.
These are all like polymaths.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So let me ask you this. We kind of touched a little bit on the pandemic. And I know during that time, I interviewed a lot of musicians, especially in New York. And of
Yeah,
all the places New York started, New York to me seemed like the scene in Star Wars where the compactor was kind of closing. Everybody's in these high rises. Neighbors were getting tired of hearing instruments all the time. And there was just this
yeah,
closing. And it was different from other areas where you could get out and traverse and do your thing. So my question to you is this. I know at that time I couldn't wait to talk to musicians about live shows and work. And now you have this album. Talk to me about South. Talk to me about how good this album feels for you.
yeah. Well, during the during the pandemic, during these long stretches of lockdown, I had a lot of time to think about the uh, who I am, where I came from, and where I'm going, or where I want to go. I think that's I'm quoting Paul Gauguin,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
and I think uh, that led me back to my roots. It didn't happen overnight. It took a couple of years, and um, it this project it didn't happen right away. I started working on a Lars Gullin tribute album, I which featured Ben Monder. And after that, I said, okay, well, I still feel this pull back home, back to my roots, like where it all started. So that's what kind of led me um, to South, where it all started. It's an autobiographical roots album about the music I grew up with. This was this was my first kind of musical language, blues, funk, gospel, uh, like traditional kind of New Orleans carnival music. And I kind of in search of other musical styles, like when I went to say college, grad school, I kind of left that behind.
Yeah.
And many years later, I realized, okay, it's still with me. Like this is where it all started. I need to go. Uh, I need to take this journey back in time and reconnect with my roots. So that was really the goal of the album.
It's interesting how if you've been around alive on this planet long enough, it really is full circle. We always kind of come back to things that we need to take care of, whether we need to resolve it, whether we want to come back for nostalgia, whether there's one thing in that room that we didn't pick up, musically speaking, going back to South. So, how did this journey begin for you? Take me back to your beginnings. How did you fall in love with music and more specifically jazz?
Well, my dad, Phil Despommier, was a jazz drummer, and that was his main gig in the 70s and 80s. He was a gigging machine. I was talking to him last night, and he said he had gigs like 5 nights a week. And after the gig, they'd go to a jam session. So it would be from like kind of 9 p.m. to almost like 9 a.m. the next morning. The jam sessions would go until like until breakfast.
Wow.
And yeah, he said like the money was really good. I'm thinking, man, like I want to hop in a time machine and go back to like the 70s and
Yeah.
80s where like yeah, I think there were just more live music venues. You know, there was no Netflix, there was no Hulu,
Hmm.
and people went out. I was reading the New York Times article the other day about I think it was in the Times, about how, you know, the new thing is to kind of to stay in, like staying in is the new going out.
Yeah.
And so it was a different world. It was a completely different world. And in many respects I think it was one that was better for better for gigging musicians. You know, you could make a living just kind of gigging.
Yeah.
Um, so I grew up in that environment. You know, I'd come home from school, and there were musicians at the house. Sometimes there were rehearsals. My dad would have music on. So I grew up in this in this musical environment, and I started playing with various kind of groups that he was in at a young age. And I think that's what made me realize like, hey, I don't just enjoy doing this. It's not uh, it's not just a recreational activity. I feel like this is a calling, you
Yeah.
know. Um, and of course, I mean, hearing all these amazing musicians in New Orleans, you know, Tony DeGrati, Johnny Vodakovich, who's featured on the album, uh, David Torkanowski, Jim Singleton, who are also featured. Like going to hear them play at Snug Harbor, you know, at the Maple Leaf, like when you're 14 years old, that does something to you.
Yeah. It has to. Totally.
Yeah, it's like they really teach you something, and that is like when you play, you have to play. Um, you have to be this sort of like vessel where the music sort of passes through you. You know, when you listen to them, when you listen to them play and you see them play, they just sort of like light up. You know,
Yeah.
so always stuck with me. It's
Yeah.
just stuck with me, and I think at an early age, I realized I wanted to be a performer. You know, I wanted to play. I wanted to do that. I wanted to be like a vessel. You know,
Yeah.
so. Um, a musical kind of channel.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, and that's kind of how I think of music is that the performer is not just someone who plays, you know, music, whether you're playing classical or jazz or folk. The idea is that you're you're channeling something, you
Yeah.
know. The music's kind of passing through you. I know that sounds kind of abstract and uh, I could probably articulate it better, but that's sort of that's the idea that it's not just meaning it's not just about you. You're part of a collective, you
Yeah.
know. Th like you're tapping into to deep roots here. So it's like yes, you want to express yourself and be an individual and make a statement, but there's something deeper going on. Like
You know,
you
in a magnanimous way, along with what you're saying there, I think about Louis Armstrong.
yeah.
How how what a personality he was, and you felt that come from the horn, come from from his voice. He was a vessel. He embodied this art form that he knew was going out to everybody else, that was a part of a collective, but he had his own voice. And yeah, I mean, that's just immediately what came to mind, especially with you talking about New Orleans. I'm just those thoughts are searing in my head.
When you're in New Orleans, like you just you hear how the music, the soil, the air, like the history, the food, it's it's all there. It all comes together, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So, what is it that gets you up every day to continue to do this? You've dedicated your life to this art form. What makes you wake up to continue this creation and to evolve and to be who you are as a musician?
That's a great question, Joe. What gets me up? I feel this kind of gravitational pull towards music, and I can't explain it. You know, like the what in the what's this Spielberg film, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where
Uh-huh.
the guy's building these like monuments kind of out in the desert, and he doesn't know why, and his wife's like, "What are you doing?" Like, and he's like, but he can't explain it, but he's like he feels like he's like programmed to kind of to do this.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it. I feel like, okay, this is what I need to do. It's a calling. Beyond that, I would say this. It's a spiritual discipline.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual a spiritual discipline, a vocation, and I fundamentally I think I want to make a connection. I want people, listeners, to be a part of this experience. Uh, like music is not. I think as I was going back to what I was saying earlier, it's a collective.
Yeah.
It's a collective, um, and um, I love kind of a bit more of a down to earth answer. I love working with all these amazing musicians I've had the privilege of working with, uh, like Jimmy Haslip, Jason Yeager. I mean, the list goes on. My dad, who's featured on the album, like, they inspire me.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. We kind of got
Yeah,
nostalgic about New Orleans. Let's
yeah.
say a time machine pulls up to your house when we get off the phone, and you can go to one jazz concert in the history of this music and see it live. Where are you going to go?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question? Back in New Orleans?
Well, no, I was just thinking about New Orleans and getting
Yeah.
nostalgic about,
Okay.
the history and lore of live music. But if you could get into a time machine and go back in time and see one live show with your own eyes, where are you going?
Oh man, that's that's a tough one.
Yeah.
One live show. I'd probably want to go hear like Robert Johnson play,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
at some kind of that recording session with Alan Lomax.
Uh-huh.
You know what? In I think it was in Texas or Beaumont,
Yep.
Houston or Beaumont. Maybe it's because like his life is has become something of like a it's become sort of like mythic,
Yeah. It's
you know?
mythological.
Yeah, mythological. And yeah, I've had to choose one. I think it would be.
I
I'd
told
want to ask him. You know, did you do this Faustian bargain, or is this
right.
something people invented after you died? Like I want to interview him and get to the truth here. So.
That would totally, that's such a great answer because I would too. There's so many suppositions that go into that. Um, so let me ask you this, Randall. At the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, fans, everyone that you work with, all the musicians, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Another another great question. Who do I think I am? Oh, I think I'm just someone who wants to make a positive impact, while I'm here.
Yeah.
You know, I I want to bring a little joy and maybe a little light into the world.
Yeah.
You know, the I mean, I love reading the news, but I try to read it in small doses
Yep.
because you the world can seem like a very dark and kind of and dreary place, and I think music can be an antidote to that.
Hmm.
You know, music, art, dance, poetry, writing, uh, and I think younger people who are considering pursuing music and art, and there's always this concern that, oh, I'm not going to make a living. I'm going to be struggling the rest of my life. Okay, yeah, there may be a struggle involved, but it's a very rewarding life. It's a
Yeah.
very rewarding vocation. Like music, the arts are very powerful, and I think uh, we've kind of lost sight of that. I mean, the Greeks knew that very well. Um, it's so much that I mean, in Plato's Republic, certain modes are banned because they're too powerful. There are certain modes that will make men too warlike, and we don't want that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If
know?
anyone wants to get a copy of South or see you live, how do they do it? Is Bandcamp the best place to get it to benefit you the most?
Yeah, Bandcamp. I have CDs for sale like here, but I encourage people to go to the Sunnyside website
Of
and
course.
buy directly. Yeah, from Bandcamp. They can download the digital album. They can and purchase a hard copy. I like to say both because look, there's something magical. I still think about getting the CD, seeing the
Yeah.
artwork, the cover art. By the way, I want to uh, thank sort of Evie Wang Shi for designing the album cover. I
Yeah.
mean, she was kind of the she was instrumental in putting that part of the album together.
Yeah.
So without her help, and this would not have come together. So here oh so here's the album.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, and look, I mean, there's the
Yeah.
there's this kind of helps tell. I think the music tells a story, but the design I think also tells a story, and that's the work of a very talented polymath from Atlanta,
Yeah.
Evie. So thank you, Evie. And yeah, so the Sunnyside website,
Okay.
and in the fall we're going to be releasing vinyls. So
Okay.
stay tuned. Yeah, the
Cool.
vinyls are on the way.
Very cool. So, if anyone wants to see you live, anything else about your world, where would they go?
Yeah, I play a lot at the Campbell apartment in Grand Central, so
Okay.
they play there. And I would just direct them to my website, which I'm updating as we speak. So if you go to my website, you're just going to see a Midsummer Odyssey, which I also hope listeners check out. In the next couple days, they're going to see uh, all the gigs that are coming up. So yeah, they can go to my website, um, randaldespommier.com. I don't post all that much on Instagram, but occasionally there's an update, so they can check out my Instagram page.
Okay. Perfect. Randall, this has been great. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to meet you.
Yeah, truly a pleasure, Joe. Like these are some of the I have to say, like, out of all the interviews I've done, this one has really prompted me to kind of self-reflect. Like I really liked your questions that were insightful and probing.
Yeah, right on. No, and it was great. Your inquisition and your wonderment about life beyond music and in music and art is absolutely refreshing. So it was an absolute joy on my end to be able to dive full on into it. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Truly a pleasure, Joe. Thank you.
Absolutely. You bet. Hello, friends. Joe Domino here. I just wanted to let you know that after 30 years or so, I have finally released my first book of poetry through the mighty Spartan Press here in Kansas City, Missouri. As the creator and host of both Neon Jazz Radio and the Famous Interviews with Joe Domino podcast, along with being a visual artist, I'm ready to embark on a new adventure and want you to be a part of it. You can get a copy online via Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and actually on the streets in Kansas City at the great Prospero's bookstore off 39th Street. You can also visit joedomino.com for links to the book, to more poetry, and everything in my world, including paintings. Thanks for all of the love and support over the years, and please dig the words.